This video has been inspired by a post on the forum about triggering Integromat, now known as Make, from a button or an action link. So in this video I'm going to do it from submitting a form, an edit form, and using an email rule to send an email to Integromat's webhook to pick up the record. From there, obviously, you can then do various things in Integromat or Make. This video won't cover the sort of things you can do once you've actually got the record into Integromat, but it's about setting up the Mailhook from Knack. So in my Classic Clips app, I have a list of clients, and there's a very simple pop-up form which edits a client. In the builder, this is the edit form. Go into the form, and on emails, I'm sending an email to this unique email address, which is the Mailhook. The email is sent from Knack when the form is submitted. The webhook picks it up and then looks up the record ID. Before I get into this, I'm just going to show you the clients table, and this is the one we're going to use, Wendy Anderson. These are all fake records, and she has an auto increment sequential number of 6, but we won't be using the auto ID, we'll be using the record ID. Now, I've come across this a number of times speaking with people that they're not aware that Knack actually uses a 24-digit record ID. So if I go over into the live app, this is the record. If I view this record, you can see the record ID exposed in the URL here. And this record ID is unique to every row in every object, so it doesn't repeat anywhere throughout the whole of Knack. So the process will be clicking on the edit link, and this submission will then send an email through to Integromat, or Make as it now is. So I'm jumping across to Integromat. I haven't made that migration to Make yet, so I will call it Integromat for the time being. If you haven't seen Integromat before, there's a couple of videos on my channel about signing up and getting started. So I'm jumping into this. I'm going to create my scenario. So the first thing I'm going to do is add a module. If you look for webhook, and you want this red webhooks module here, and then select custom Mailhook. Going to add a webhook name, save that, and it then gives you the unique email address. So I can copy that address and then just say OK on this module. So this Mailhook will be looking for an incoming email. So I'm going to run this module now, so it's sitting here waiting. So this is my client table in the builder, and I want to put the event on the edit page. So this is my edit page here. If I click on the page and then go to emails and add a new email rule, it'll send a custom email. You don't need to put the name it's from. It's using the email address in my app. The important bit is to put that email address from the webhook into here. This is where you're sending the email to. You don't need a subject line, but just to show, I'm going to put in here the auto increment, which is the ID number. I'm just going to put that in and remove the word your subject. The record ID, which is a 24-digit character, you can only put it in the body of the email here. It's not available in the subject heading, and you can't copy it across. It just doesn't work. So I'm just going to look up the record ID field, which is here. Obviously, once again, I'm just going to remove the words your message, and it's also important to make sure there's no leading spaces before it. Sometimes when you paste it in, there's a blank space which will cause an issue. So what's going to happen, it's going to send an email to this email address, and in the body of the email will be the record ID. Now, Knack obviously gives you the ability to be able to put this in as HTML, so when it receives it, it will actually come through like this with the tags for paragraph. So you have a left bracket, a P, and a right bracket. So we need to strip these out. So in Integromat, this first character is character 0, and that's character 1 and character 2. And so we want to start from character 3, and we want to go for to the 27th character, so we end up with the 24 characters. So we're just stripping out the 24 character record ID and effectively not using the tags. Now you can't use in Integromat the strip HTML, that doesn't work, so we have to use what's called a substring. But I'll get into that in a second. So the webhook is sitting here running. Just going to flick this back, so I've got my record ID in here. I'm going to save that. So do a quick browser refresh, and now I'm going to click on edit and simply submit this form, and part of that submission will send an email to that webhook. I'm going to jump over into Integromat, and you can see that the webhook worked and I received some information. So in the subject is number 6, and I can't use this text. The only one I can use is this one, which is the record ID. Not quite sure the reasons why. I've just never been successful leveraging this. It just comes up with a 502 error. But if you use this one, we can use this to look up the record from Knack. So what I need to do, and those that will be familiar with using Integromat, you need to use the Knack module and the get a record component. So select your appropriate connection, select the object, which mine is the client object, and then the record ID. We're going to use the HTML content, which was the body of the email. But before we do that, we need to go into the text and binary functions and select the substring. You can do 3 left arrows. It will put you into the correct place in between the brackets, and then go back to your fields and select HTML, and then cursor right once, put 3, cursor right again and put 27. So it's going to take the numbers between the 3rd and the 27, which will strip out these tags, the P tags, the paragraph tags. I'm just going to save that, run that scenario one more time, back into my app, edit the record, submit, and that will fire the webhook again. So I received the information in, and then it looked up that record ID, which is here, which is 61327. If I go back into the live app and view this record, you can see in the URL is 61327. So this is the record which it looked up, and then you have all the data relating to that. So the ID number was 6. So if I go back into the table, you can see here that this record ID 6 is for Wendy Anderson. So her name's pulled through here, and then all the other fields. So this gives you the ability now to be able to pick up a record into Integromat to do other things with it, which I won't go into in this video, from an event such as editing the record. Now, for those that are more familiar with Integromat, you'll be aware that normally the actions are on creating a record, or to delete a record, update a record, or search for records. There isn't any way when you edit a record or you click on an action link to fire the scenario. So sending an email to the webhook to pick up the record ID so you can then move through that process of your scenario is a very effective way, and I use the webhooks a lot. So the other option of that is also just to do it on an action link. So going back into the builder, I'm looking at my accounts object. I only have 2 accounts. They're both actually me, a couple of different user roles. And I've added a new field, which is just called credentials sent, which is a very simple date time field. The date format is UK, and it doesn't have a default date, and it doesn't have a default time. And what I want to do is this will be part of sending login credentials to a new user. But I want to trigger it from an action link, update the field saying credentials sent, and then send this record to Integromat so I can use Outlook 365, I can create a password, and I can send all the login credentials to them from a single click. So this is the table view on the accounts page, a very simple view. I look at that in the builder. I'm just going to add in the column which is the credentials sent, save that. And what I'm going to do is add another column which is an action link. So click on actions and trigger an action. So the header of the column I'm going to call send, and I'm going to put a line break, send credentials. The actual link text, I'm going to use a button class, and it's just going to be an orange button which will say email. And I've talked about button classes before, so you can check that out in the video on the link above. I'm not going to add a criteria, but I'm going to add an action, because this is obviously an action link. I do need to do something. So I'm going to set the credentials sent to the current date and time. And the message will be email sent. Because what we will do is send login credentials to the user. I'm just going to change it to header 3. It's kind of my standard size for the little pop-up. And then I'm just going to set the column width to 50 and centerize the button and save. Just going to go back to my live app to make sure that looks okay. So I have a line break and wrapped text there, and a little button that says email. So back into the builder, I'm just going to add another action. So click on the little plus here, and I'm going to change it to send a custom email, and once again put the email address to Integromat's webhook. I generally put the subject as the auto increment. In this case, I'm just going to use the email because I don't have one. and in the body text of the HTML I'm going to look up the record ID. I always click to the left of the curly bracket and just do a backspace to make sure there's no leading zeros or no blank spaces, and save. So that will now send an email to the hook. So back in Integromat, I've deleted my Knack module, so I just have the webhook again. So I'm just going to run the webhook on its own just to test it. So I'm going to press email, the action link will fire, it will add today's date. So as you can see, I get the banner to say email sent, and the date and time that the credentials were sent has been added to the table. The email has been received by the webhook, and we have the record ID enclosed in HTML tags. So once again, I just need to add a Knack module, get a record, select the appropriate connection. My object is the accounts object. The record ID is once again going to be the HTML content, but my usual path is to go into the text and binary functions, substring, 3 left arrows, back to the fields, click into the HTML content to put that in, arrow right once, 3, arrow right, 27, OK. Just going to save and run that scenario again, back to classic clips, and I'm going to hit the credentials button again. So that's once again given me my little action link tag. It's updated to 8:34, and I'm going to go back into Integromat. One bundle is received here, and then it's pulled this through to record ID. So this information is coming from my accounts object. So I've got the user's name, I've got their email address, so I can open this up here. And so that's the email address I can send this information to. You can't leverage the password here, so I'll do a separate video how to send password information. But this is effectively the user's details, the user role, and information about the credentials. So in summary, using the webhook is a very flexible way to be able to send, or Mailhooks, send credentials to Integromat to be able to start your scenario without either having to use the search module or waiting for a new event module. So you can put these onto edit forms and action links. I hope that's been of some use. Obviously a lot to unpack, as we would say, and I hopefully see you on the next one.